Hello to all you vacation rental pioneers out there. My name's Matt Landau, and this is Unlocked, the podcast series that introduces you to the world's leading vacation rental innovators by diving deep into one single key, one specific best practice or technique that opened the door and changed the game. Despite the fact you've heard a number of icon interviews from us already, Cliff Johnson was the first one I actually ever recorded. It's fair to say that Cliff was the whole reason behind this icon series. I was talking to him at lunch. I was fascinated by his background and his attitude about life. And I was basically just really curious to learn more about Cliff. Cliff's one of the more recognizable names in our industry. He can be seen at most of the top conferences on panels and on stage talking about big trends, deep currents beneath the travel and business worlds that lead him to make his own predictions, his own business decisions, his own personal moves. I had the pleasure of sitting down with Cliff in my living room in New Orleans after Amy's Vacation Rental Women's Summit, and we poured each other a glass of bourbon and just started talking shop. Here's me and Cliff. My name's Matt Landau, and this is Unlocked. Welcome.
Good. It's a pleasure to be here.
Where are you right now?
I'm in New Orleans, one of the best places in the world.
And more specifically?
In your apartment.
In my living room.
Yes, in your living room.
After we just had the chance to meet for the first time, we had wonderful lunch. I had some drum fish, and you had, if I'm not mistaken, some other fish.
I had a pecan catfish.
It was delicious.
Yeah.
One of the best parts about New Orleans is the cuisine. A lot of people think that it's just Creole and Cajun, but in fact, New Orleans is a food city, and there's all kinds of things going on here.
Oh, certainly. And every time I've come here, I've never been disappointed with a meal.
And let's start off with a basic introduction. Why don't you introduce yourself and where you're from originally?
Yeah. So I'm Cliff Johnson, originally from the Jersey Shore, not far from Princeton, your stomping grounds, as we learned today. But then I moved to Missouri at the age of 11 to a farm in the middle of nowhere, to a town called Preston with 113 people.
With 113 people in town. So you must have known everyone pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much. Although surprisingly, not everyone. It's a place to go if you don't like people is a town with 113 people. So there were definitely recluses.
Oh, like old man Garvey.
Yeah, some of you would know of them, but you had never run into them because they would generally not leave home. So
Fair.
There's a few of those.
And what brought you to that little town in the middle of nowhere?
My grandparents had retired out there and bought a little hobby farm. And so we would go visit them. And then, it was the early 90s. So it was, there was a recession going on. And my dad was in and out of work. He was a welder and pipe fitter. And so it was an opportunity to go out there where properties were much cheaper and we could go, buy a house and everything. So
and from there, you eventually made your way into, created some fame for yourself in the world of theater.
A little bit, yes. Very local fame, I would say. I did theater from a young age. I started at 4 and I did summer theater camps and kept with that throughout my life. And so even when I went to Missouri, I would do high school plays, and then I got a scholarship to go do theater in college, and then I kept it going through law school. And
so you're a legit. Explain to me exactly what you were doing within theater.
Primarily acting to start, but then once I got into college, I started doing scene design, directing, lighting design, broadening the skill set there. I was actually better at things other than acting, it turned out.
Like what?
There's less competition. Well, lighting design became one of the things I was better at during college, and directing was something I became really passionate about. And then in law school, I continued doing that, and we did sketch comedy. So actually a good friend of mine here in New Orleans, John Womack, that we'll meet later today, was in a sketch comedy group with me in Boston.
And is that like a improvisation, that sort of thing?
We did all more like Saturday Night Live style, where we would actually write the skits and then perform them.
That is so cool. And were you good at it?
Marginal, I wasn't bad. We made people laugh. That was fun. But it was not something that became a career. I never attempted to make it a career either. It always felt unrealistic to me to make a career out of that.
Interesting, because I always played soccer, and I always loved soccer, and I was pretty good.
Yeah.
But I had that same mentality also always, that I was never quite good enough or committed enough for it to be like my life.
Yeah.
And I eventually got weeded out when college came around, and you're basically forced. Either you're committing to effectively a full-time job while you're in school by playing on the soccer team, or just doing pickup games?
Definitely. Actually, soccer was another passion of mine. And I played all through, through the end of high school. And then when I went into college, I either had to play soccer or do theater. I really couldn't do both. And so I went the theater route.
Interesting.
Yeah, I went to a D3 school, so you couldn't even get a scholarship for playing soccer. So that was one of the factors that influenced me.
And you got a scholarship for theater?
Yeah, theater was okay, but there's no athletic scholarship. So
interesting. Okay, so are you still doing this kind of thing? Before we get ahead of ourselves, are you still directing plays secretly under the table?
Ironically, I'm not. I always, and I guess that's not that ironic, but I was thinking about when I left law, one of my goals was to live a more balanced life. Instead, I went and co-founded Vacasa with Eric, and I had no time for anything else.
Okay. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here.
Yeah.
You went to study law.
Yeah.
And what kind of law?
I was really passionate about particularly something called the Innocence Project, which was started at Northwestern, which there were a lot of people that were on death row through faulty evidence, essentially. And the Innocent Project basically brought that to light, freed a lot of innocent people. That was the thing that inspired me to go to law school. But really, it was more of a general feeling towards using law as a vehicle for change, for positive things in the world. And so once I got to law school, I definitely stayed active in that realm and was fortunate to go to school with a lot of people that have done tremendous things in that space. But I didn't have the luxury of being able to come out of school and not earning enough of a salary to basically pay back law school debt and other expenses. So
is that system, by the way, kind of like broken in that sense?
No, definitely. I mean, that's something that's really a major issue. There are a lot of jobs for lawyers when you come out. Most of them, like the disparity between what the actual pay is based on the debt load that you come out with is pretty crazy. Actually, one of the positions that I looked at was a position where I would have been representing people on death row in Atlanta, ironically, where I've now lived. But it was going to pay me $26,000 a year. So I would have had to work as a bartender while people's lives depended on my work as an attorney. So that was something that was really interesting to learn. As I was in school, I started to figure out that it was impractical for me to come straight out of school and take one of these nonprofit positions where I really couldn't afford to live.
And that was the point that you found yourself thinking about other lines of work?
No, I came out and worked as a tax attorney, which I found to be a very morally neutral ground. So,
morally neutral, is that like another way of saying just boring as hell?
Yes, boring as hell was one of the things. But it was mostly, I didn't want to come out. I had offers to go work at big law firms doing things I didn't want to do, like go represent mining companies and stuff like that. So for me, it was like the reward of working hard in school and doing well in law school wasn't so that I could go make some corporation wealthy. And so instead, I found a niche in tax law where I primarily worked with small and mid-sized businesses, which I really enjoyed digging into and helping them out. And I had a lot of freedom at the places that I did work in tax law, so that once I got a client, I was largely able to work as much as I wanted for that client, as long as I got some retainer from them.
And just to be clear, you had opportunities, you had legal opportunities that could have earned you a whole bunch of money. But this might have been one of the first times professionally that you kind of had to choose what you wanted to be doing versus the paycheck that you'd be receiving.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, personally, I think it's pretty crazy if you look at the legal system in the US. The majority of people that are really intelligent and do really well in law school end up at big law firms representing companies that they may not be aligned with in terms of their own personal values. And so things are changing a little bit, but law is also a fairly archaic industry where it hasn't adapted as quickly as some other industries. There's a lot of regulations that prevent people from really changing that quickly in law too.
So is the tip here for young professionals to kind of articulate and say out loud what their values are and where they're not willing to negotiate?
For me personally, yes. And I think I've always been somebody that is quick to make a decision based on my values instead of based on what's most financially rewarding. But realizing that life is complicated and there are a lot of factors that go into that, and I've had things throughout my life that make me choose a path that's more based on finances than based on what I'd like to do with my time. And so I think that's what we all live in, is the world of, do we do what we love or do we do what we have to do to make ends meet?
Folks, just a quick reminder, if you're finding yourself intrigued or curious or maybe just engaged with Cliff's story thus far, knowing full well the other things he's gone on to accomplish in his life, use this as a chance to reflect back on your own background. What were you passionate about in school? What did you believe in? Think about working these stories into your marketing, your About Us page on your website or your property listing, even the decoration of your property itself. These should be a snapshot of you and what you stand for. Personality may just be our greatest differentiator, so don't forget to play it up. Let's get back to me and Cliff. Nicely put, and that's a perfect sort of segue into this wonderful world in which we work today together, vacation rentals. And you found your way into this industry through Craigslist.
Definitely.
Good old Craigslist.
Yeah. Now, Eric...
was this in the missed connections section?
We used to joke about that a lot, especially internally at the company that Eric and I had met via missed connections. But really, it was just an ad that he posted that was rather cryptic in retrospect. I think he still has it somewhere. But it was a post that was looking for an entrepreneur to help him launch different kinds of businesses and then do a bunch of odd other tasks. I think... like there was even something about doing laundry in there. But one thing, like I've always prided on my...
Doing laundry?
Yeah. No, I'd have to go back and look at the ad, but it was really like a multifaceted thing. At the time, Eric had a company called Oregon Green Solutions, which did weatherization and rehab of old properties under a government grant program.
And Eric, this is someone who was living in the same city that you were.
Eric Brion, who's the CEO of Vacasa, was living in Portland. At the time, I was living in San Francisco.
So you were browsing the Portland Craigslist.
Yeah, I had lived in Portland in 2005 during my second year of law school, doing an internship there at a nonprofit. It was a really great company.
What was that one called?
Community Development Law Center, which was really innovative on affordable housing and homelessness issues and other things. And so I had worked up there and absolutely loved Portland. Like even to this day, I love Atlanta. I'm living there now. It's fun. But Portland at that time period definitely fit my personality to a T.
You like Pock Pock?
Yeah, Pock Pock's a great place.
I've got some Pock Pock drinking vinegars in my refrigerator.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, they ship them now wherever you want.
Yeah, no, they are doing quite well.
It's
a great food scene.
If you have never, what is the Pock Pock? Southeast Asian cuisine in general.
Yeah,
right?
it's predominantly Thai, but they do mix in some other, Southeast Asian foods.
And the drinking vinegar, I had never heard of it before, but that's one of their things.
Oh yeah,
and it's basically vinegar and cane sugar distilled down into this syrup, and it makes for a sour sort of cocktail mixer.
Yeah.
And I was blown away. It just blew my mind.
Oh, it's an incredible place. I lived half a mile from Pock Pock when I lived in Portland. So and my wife, that was like her favorite place when we first met. And then, Portland is the city of like cool restaurants. So Pock Pock has stood the test of time. But, it's kind of in the middle of cool restaurants in Portland now.
Right.
It's always like, what's the new thing?
Of course.
That's even more obscure in terms of what they serve.
And at this moment, you were browsing your Craigslist. And you're sitting there in your house, you're browsing Craigslist, and you find this guy who's looking for all kinds of help, including his laundry. And you think to yourself, I'm going to reach out to this man.
Yes. No, I've always been I'm an optimist, right? So a lot of times when I read a description for something or look into something, I'll look at what are the aspects of it that really resonate with me. And then if there's things that don't, like laundry to me would be like, I'm not above any task. And I think that comes from like living on a farm and dealing with some really crazy stuff. So it's like the farm, like no task is above you.
Laundry is
you just got to do what you got to do. Laundry is easy. So I was never afraid of that. And I like really kind of getting my hands dirty, so to speak, and like doing things where they're really tangible. So the description called out to me. I was torn between starting my own law firm at that point or going to help somebody launch a business. I had worked with a lot of small and mid-sized businesses that were really interesting, a lot of different industries. And so felt always compelled to work on the business side, because the legal side was really restrictive. There was one of 4 or 5 things that I could do for any company I worked with as it related to corporate structure, tax law.
And the small business
And
was
then
just
the business, I could always find ways to help them with their business. There was always something that they were missing because they were too close to it.
And out of curiosity, why would you have ever chosen the law route with so many more restrictions?
It was the social justice bent. Like that's what got me into law. It wasn't that I would really love detail oriented work. That's the worst part of my day is like entering expenses and doing things that are really super detailed.
That makes 2 of us.
Yeah. So,
But for you, it was more the impact that work was.
No, it was the ability, like seeing how much really law has changed the world in the last couple hundred years. It's amazing. And I worked my first year of law school. I did an internship in Cambodia. And that was still like far and away one of the most impactful experiences of my life. They had just been admitted to the WTO, which I think is not a great thing. But for Cambodia at the time, it was a positive thing. So it forced them to
World Trade Organization.
Yeah, it forced them to implement some employment and labor laws that I was there at a time where people were actively taking advantage of that. Now, since that time, it's gone back and forth because there's been a lot of outward pressure for them to ease the protection of workers because of Chinese manufacturing and all these other things, which would take another hour podcast. But
separate podcast.
Yeah, separate podcast. But like I think seeing law can make a big difference. It's generally not the thing, not by itself though, because you can have great laws in the books if they're not enforced or if there's corruption or other things. It doesn't matter.
So you were pursuing a legitimate career as a theater star. And then eventually you were seriously contemplating a legal route.
Yeah.
And then you answered to this Craigslist ad and you find yourself working in Portland?
Yeah. No, I worked in Portland, 2009 and got together with Eric. I did an interview up there. He was renting a place in Northwest Portland with these beautiful views of the, Mount Hood and Mount Adams and all this great scene you get in Portland on a sunny day, which is rare. And we didn't talk a lot about the job because Vacasa didn't exist yet. So it really wasn't about Vacasa. We talked about his existing company, Oregon Green Solutions, and he had a company called Vacation Rental Directory, Inc., which wasn't really anything yet either. The concept was more like a listing site for vacation rentals. But more than anything, we ended up having a long discussion on, it's more like life philosophy stuff.
In the first interview?
Yeah, it felt more like a conversation than an interview. Because at the time, I was an attorney in San Francisco. And for me, it was more about, am I ready to take this plunge into the world of entrepreneurship and making significantly less money and all this other stuff, to go just try something else out. So it was a really good discussion.
Where were you? Were you saying like restaurant or something?
No, we were at his house. He had this house that he was renting in Northwest Portland, that had this mountain view and everything. And we're sitting there and it was a really great discussion. And I think to this day, like I can still have really interesting intellectual discussions with Eric. And that was what drove me to do it more than anything, was the thought around a lot of our discussion ended up being around like basically libertarian and socialist philosophies and how can you combine the best of both to create a better society for everyone? Like where is there overreach and where is there a lack of social safety net for people?
That's a deep conversation to be having on your first date.
Yeah, no, it was. It was a really great conversation. And so I think those are areas where it's funny now, like looking back at that time period, that we actually connect better, I would say, on a deeper level than we did on like how to run a business.
Okay, so let's then move on to the next point in your life. So you have this interesting conversation with this guy in his living room, Eric.
Yeah.
Did the topic of laundry come up?
No, I never did any laundry. It was like several years later where we were staying in Park City or something, and I did some of his laundry, and I was like, I finally did some of your laundry because we both had laundry to do.
Check it off.
But no, early days, I never ended up doing any laundry.
And then what happens?
There were 3 of us. So Eric was still working full time and had this other company. And then ended up like me, Eric, and Nick Tostenrud, who's a great guy, works for Amazon now. And he had like built a company to help, basically sold disability products for schools, and then sold it for quite a bit of money at 25 and retired early, and then wanted to get back in space. Anyway, so the three of us get together in really November of 09 and start building out. We bought Escapia as a vacation rental software platform, and then built out a website.
Wait.
Yeah, sorry.
You just went way too fast.
I went too fast, yeah.
You start working together with Eric.
Eric and then Nick Tostenrud, this the third co-founder. He was only there for a few months.
You form a business together.
Yeah, we had when we started Vacasa, Eric's wife Aaliyah had a family cabin in Long Beach, Washington. It's a little 400 square foot cabin on the wrong side of the highway, so not a super desirable vacation rental. But Eric and Aaliyah had been managing it on their own and been doing quite well with it in an area that there is not a lot of options when it comes to who to choose as a vacation rental manager. And the managers that were there weren't that interested in the property. So they said, that'll do like $3,000 a year. And they did like $20,000 in the first year with it. So it had done well at that time. So we had that one property as an example of what we might be able to do.
Of an industry, really.
No, definitely. I think it was, I know looking back in retrospect, it was telling of where the gap was at the time. But we initially launched with a vision of having two products, with having a booking service product where we would just do the marketing and booking and rate management for certain homes, and then book them on behalf of managers or something, which is a little more, maybe a bit similar to the Evolve model. Although Evolve primarily works with single homeowners.
Evolve Vacation Rentals.
Yeah. So we launched that. And
which we love, by the way, right?
Yeah. No, I think it fills a gap, and really I haven't seen anybody else do it. It's kind of interesting to look at. I mean, there's owner. To me, it's like they take on the easier part of it. The hard part is operations.
Totally.
So what we figured out at Vacasa early days was that doing booking service for people and not having control of the full experience led to a lot of friction points where we felt that controlling the end-to-end experience was really important.
Why?
Predominantly so we could add value. Like we felt that just by booking a property where we couldn't control like what happened after we booked it, made it difficult for us. We were still the person that the guests talked to.
Even if you did a great job.
So if they showed up and they were unhappy.
If you did a great job and some other variable messed up,
we still were the one they talked to.
Not a sustainable business model.
No, exactly. So we canned that like 3 weeks in. We had a ton of properties, in like 60 homes in Hawaii.
How'd you get to that?
What's that?
How'd you get from one property to 60 in Hawaii?
I was cold calling people like crazy. So I went from being like a tax attorney to a cold caller.
How'd you find the phone numbers?
VRBO had them all on there at the time,
We just go down the list and call?
Yeah, just go down and call people.
What'd you say?
I'd say, hey, can we book your home, essentially? And here's what we're doing about that. And so it worked pretty well.
You actually wanted to stay there?
No,
that was your hook?
We were booking it on behalf of them. So
on behalf
of whoever was managing the property, whether it was the manager or the homeowner, we would start bringing bookings to them.
I see.
And we were actually good at it. Like we would bring, at the time, you have to remember, this is 2009, early 2010, by the time we launched the website. And at that time, most people were on one channel. Like a lot of the software available wouldn't allow you to distribute across multiple channels.
Right.
So we would do an analysis and figure out, okay, how are they marketing this property now? And for a lot of properties, they were marketed on either one channel, like on VRBO, or on their website and one channel. But they weren't taking advantage of vacationrentals.com was actually its own thing at the time.
I remember it.
Quite successful, And so we were able to bring incremental revenue to these properties. But it was really short-lived in the sense that we identified very early on that managing other people to manage properties was really tough. Just in terms of meeting guest expectations. And we, one thing I'll give us credit for now, looking back on it, was we didn't really feel we were adding value. We felt that we were just
taking advantage or middleman.
Yeah, we were just a middleman.
Getting in the way.
We were something that would be relevant for a period of time, but eventually we would be displaced. And lo and behold, like Airbnb was a little bit ahead of us, but at that time, Airbnb was nothing. It was just a good idea. And so that wasn't really a threat to the industry or changing the industry in any way. And so we really committed like full on to full service property management. And so that narrowed our focus. Instead of working across all these markets, we focused on Portland was largely illegal. Like we could do commercially zoned properties, but we couldn't do much there. So we focused on Mount Hood, which is a ski market, but has a good summer market as well. Sun River, which is a traditional resort market, like golf and tennis and, little family houses and things like that. And then the Oregon coast, which at the time was a highly seasonal market. Like it was a summer market.
So 3 markets.
Yeah. And so I spent my life in an 8-hour loop, like going out to the Oregon coast.
Were you going and meeting these people?
Yeah. So to sign a home at that time, it was 100% in person. Like
so you would just go the in-person version of your cold calls.
I would cold call them first,
right?
Talk to them about their property, why they're managing it themselves, right? what the gaps were, and everything.
And if they sign up, or maybe if they're still thinking about signing up, you actually show up at their door and say hi.
Yeah, no, I would meet them either in Portland. So a lot of our owners lived in Portland and then had homes in these other 3 locations, and so I'd either meet them in Portland, but usually it would take meeting them at the house to get the contract signed and to get full control over the property.
I want to take a quick breather before we get into some really deep stuff about Cliff to thank the team that makes this podcast possible, and it's Point Central, the home automation experts of our industry. They offer things like smart locks and smart thermostats, the kinds of tools that free up our time and our brain power to focus on the stuff that we're best at. There are some old-fashioned things that we, as this first generation of vacation rental managers, cannot afford to cut corners on, like showing up at somebody's front door and smiling. But for a lot of the other tasks that can be streamlined with technology, there's Point Central. Head over to pointcentral.com/VRMB for a free demo. Maybe even tell them you know the famous play director, Cliff Johnson, and they'll give you free HVAC analytics too. HVAC analytics basically notify you when your HVAC is acting up before it dies on you or your guests. That's pointcentral.com/VRMB, which is a simple page that explains the automation offerings and has a place to ask for more information. Now let's get back to me and Cliff.
At the time, having an evergreen contract that was terminable at will was a major differentiator. And so a lot of these companies, these homeowners, had been working with companies that required them to sign a 1-year contract or might have all these other things that they were charging them for that the owners were unhappy with. And so it felt pretty easy, but we were really selling ourselves at the time. And they, the owner's question oftentimes was, why did you leave law to do this? It seems like really hard.
But you're selling yourselves in plural, but it's really you showing up at these doors.
Yeah. Eric did some of that as well in the early days for sure.
But you're taking a lot of responsibility on your individual shoulders.
No, we definitely did. And so we duplicated each other's efforts. So Nick, the third co-founder, left about 3 months in to go to Oxford and study and stuff.
I hate it when that happens.
Yeah, it's such a problem, So Eric, it was really just Eric and I for the first year of the company. And Eric's brother, Keith, was an unpaid intern for the first summer, which was nice. We paid him in food and lodging, so it worked out well. But we kind of divided and conquered because early on, we were doubling up on everything where we would confer with each other on, does this seem like the right thing to do, and really trying to refine the business around, what our business model was, how much we should be doing for owners, what should we be charging for versus what should be included in our management fee, all those decisions that I think are fairly critical. We worked together on. And then we got to a point that was exacerbated by Eric's first son being born that summer after we launched the business, where Eric really focused on the back end of the business and I focused on the front end. So that really helped us quite a bit, where I was customer facing, owner facing, everything else, operations, and he started building the back end of our system, which became a nice competitive advantage.
And that brings us into what sounds like business growth mode.
Yeah, no, hyper growth. It was a wild 8.5 years for sure.
What is that like? Because speaking very personally,
Yeah.
I don't like the idea of things moving too quickly.
Oh,
When
it's a
things
challenge,
when things move quickly, my standards get compromised. I end up making it almost inevitably some bad decisions or decisions that didn't turn out optimally. I end up letting some people down, and I tend to let those things get to me.
Yeah.
Were you letting those things get to you, or do you just have your head to your nose to the grindstone?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the first few years of Vacasa were, in retrospect, a blur. It was a perfect storm for me personally, where when I first started Vacasa, I had just been out of a breakup with the person I was engaged with. So I focused 100% of my energy on my professional life, right?
Which is something that a lot of people are familiar with, that moment.
Yeah. And so for me, it allowed me basically to do it all, to provide hyper growth and a high level of guest and owner experience.
What, like I'm just going to commit whatever it takes to do this properly?
And make myself 100% available to do it. It was the time period of my life where that was fine. And I'll give Eric 100% credit to this day that he's a very hard worker as well. So I think we were able to outwork it for the first few years.
And that's something I see in vacation rental owners and managers is they do have that sense of almost like, I'm not willing to let it be done any other way.
Yeah.
Then great.
No, and I think the first few years of reviews, like that was always my guiding light. My guiding light was, are we delivering great experiences for owners and guests? And we were at 4.9 out of 5.
How do you measure that?
Well, at the time, it was really measuring it off of the reviews we were pulling in
from the guests.
Yeah.
So for you, that was your indicator.
Well, and owners, we didn't have owners leaving at all, like in the early days, but our attrition was nothing.
So basically, owners are signing up.
Owners
no
are
one is leaving.
Other owners to us.
No one is leaving. Everyone's recommending friends, and guests are loving it.
Yeah.
Pretty much a triple win.
Yeah. Well, and it was controllable at that size, right? I think we're at, a turning point in terms of being able to control the experience was getting into rapid market expansion.
Because now a lot of people speak really negatively, have very emotional responses to Vacasa that I've come in contact with. And why is that?
Well, I think it's both ways. I mean, I think if you spoke to, most of the owners are still happy. So it's more about, and most of the guests are still happy that work through Vacasa. If not, the business would fall apart really quickly.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's that there's a lot of opportunities to fail every day. And so as you grow a business, you grow your opportunities to fail. And you also grow the distance between the people that are benefiting the most from whatever you're offering and the people that actually have to deliver on it. And so like one of my biggest messages to businesses, and I'm an advisor for several businesses, is make sure every single person in your company is connected to your vision, your mission, your values, so that they understand how what they do in that business is, one, important and critical to the overall business, and then two, rewarded off of that. So,
and this applies to almost any size business.
Yeah, and any industry. But it's the thing that people get wrong the most is like, we all know, I worked in a lot of shitty jobs over my life. I know how people act when they're being treated poorly. It's not good. It's not pretty. And the thing that I think Eric and I always had in common, both of us grew up working from a young age. Like we both started working at 13. So we both worked at the Olive Garden. We know what it's like to work at a shitty place.
And in restaurants in general, where people will just...
And you know how people behave when they don't feel connected to whatever their paycheck is coming from. And so, or beyond that, and that's where a lot of the values that we have at Rented now are really focused on how do we make sure what we do connects to everybody that's delivering on what we're promising.
So let's fast forward to more or less the current day.
Yeah.
You left this project that you kind of babied.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the right word.
Yeah.
It was your baby.
Yeah. No, it still feels like a baby in many ways. That's grown. It's now an adolescent and I can't control it anymore.
There's no controlling it. It's going out. It's like, Dad, see you later. I'll come home whenever I want to, and I'm not going to answer your calls. And you're now with Rented, and the brief overview of Rented's role in the industry is?
Yeah, we're really the connection between the homeowners who are looking for an easier answer to who should I be working with, and the managers who oftentimes the best managers are the people who are really ingrained in the local community, that really understand the local community, and they might be able to deliver really well on 7 out of the 8 things that owner cares about, but they might not be great about marketing themselves. And the best fit for a given owner might be a different manager in every case, And so that's something that we look at is like, how do we pair the right owner and the right manager together and then help managers scale in the areas that they may not be able to afford to at their current size.
And I have to apologize. Almost on cue, my mother text messages me whenever I'm recording something. So sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'd like to end this with 2 components. First will be a little quick fire round.
Yeah.
A couple very quick questions. Answer first thing that comes to your mind. A thing you are most proud about your professional life?
Oh, professional life. I think the way I've treated everybody that I've worked with over the years.
Things you're most proud about your personal growth?
100% my kids and the devotion I have to them and making sure they have a good environment.
Making me cry. Biggest challenge for the vacation rental industry at the moment?
Delivering great experiences and consistent experiences.
Best secret weapon in vacation rental owner and managers' portfolios?
Intimate knowledge of the market they work in.
Most important place of technology in the future of vacation rentals?
Anything that doesn't require personal touch, which really comes down to the automate everything except for the experience that they have in the home.
Favorite restaurant in Atlanta?
Oh, that's a good one. Barcelona.
Is the Spanish restaurant?
Yeah, it's tapas.
What do we order there?
Well, all tapas, everything's good. So it's hard to say.
Excellent. Excellent. Where the vacation rental industry is 5 years from now?
I think far more curated in the sense that local managers will have stronger brands and a lot of the managers that deliver poor experiences will be gone.
Vacation rentals as an industry, in one word, as it is perceived and consumed by the mainstream public. What does vacation rentals mean to the world?
I think it means the new way of travel. It's experiencing the world through the lens of a local.
Which is technically 5 words, but is about as accurate as it gets.
Yeah.
I would like to thank you.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Not only for lunch, because it was some sort of an unexpected lunch, but also for your role in the industry and for following what you are meant to do and for making the decisions that you have made and for contributing in the way that you contribute and for coming to these kinds of events and sharing your wisdom. I think that's very important to a young industry.
The feeling is certainly mutual, and I appreciate the time.
And to close, just a quick reminder of who made this episode possible. It's Point Central, the property automation experts of our industry. Head over to pointcentral.com/VRMB to learn more. And when you use that page, you'll become eligible for free HVAC analytics, which tells managers when the HVAC starts to misbehave before our guests get upset. This also makes property owners happy by taking care of the problem before it becomes too expensive. And if you're feeling cheerful, please also consider writing us a quick review in your podcast app. We read every single one of them, and we pass them along to our esteemed guests. This industry is growing up quickly, my friends. This industry is unlocked.